All right, we are live. Claude has something going on over here. Get 2x more usage on weekends and outside the hours of 5 to 11 a.m. PT, 6 to or 12 to 6 p.m. GMT on weekdays now through March 27. Okay. Something I was thinking about right now. We just got back from the plunge. Something I was thinking about is that how. Okay, multiple thoughts, but number one, went to this matches with the jacket. Okay, we went to a bookstore, one of the good bookstores that I really like in Montreal. Sorry, in Mount Pleasant, and it's called Fake Work. Very interesting. Very interesting, especially during these times when you realize that, okay, there are companies who are trying to use AI to cut down on all the inefficiencies and move things further. On the other hand, the discussion around this book, Fake Work, and this other book called Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, one of the professors, it's around this idea that fake work and all these bullshit jobs were created so that the government can distribute money to individuals in the society. And that is the idea. These fake jobs, bullshit jobs were created so government can distribute money to individuals. And very interesting idea. And now on the same idea, we are seeing that all the companies, they are now stopping to hire the right people because again they care about efficiency, they care about how do we increase revenue, how do we how do we increase the profits. But you never think about this idea that what is happening by the fact that government is trying to create these jobs so that it can distribute the money. It's a very interesting contrast. This is a very interesting contrast. If Bullshit Jobs and Fake Work, these two books, if their thesis is right, what happens in the next 1 year where more and more people adopt AI tools and cut down on all the waste in order to increase efficiency in the business. Let's see what we have. And one more interesting thing is that right now I'm thinking about working with some individuals and seeing that, okay, curiosity is really important. This act that we are doing right now, this is very therapeutic. So for a smart individual, it's really important that they are able to choose their own adventure based on, like, what is gamification? Gamification is basically meeting you where you are. And that's the exact thing that AI is doing today with learning. AI understands that, okay, if you are 12-year-old and if you're asking about neuroscience, if it knows that you are 12-year-old and if you're asking for neuroscience, it is going to give you a different response than if you are a PhD in neuroscience. And what is happening over here is that it is helping you, it is allowing you to get into flow state. AI allows you to get into flow state because what is happening, because it is meeting you where you are. And that means that you actually quickly get into flow state, you enjoy that process, and you get deeper and deeper into learning that subject or whatever you are into right now. Because what happens with, let's say, social media today, it's very short form, very anxiety inducing. The right people that you actually want to be around, the people that you actually want to hear from, they are not on social media. On the other hand, what is happening with, it's actually very interesting that people keep giving advice. There are channels where people just keep giving advice because that is their business. You have to understand that how you are today is exactly how everyone else is today, which means that you are constantly changing your idea about the world. You're constantly changing about your thoughts on how the world is and how things are improving and everything. And all these people who are giving advice, they also have to live tomorrow, and they are looking for advice from someone who is older than them and someone who has whatever they are trying to do they have done, because nobody is complete. Nobody has completed the journey and telling you that, oh, this is how the journey ends. um, that isn't how it works. It can work if you are in an university, but whatever, the times are changing, world is changing, and advice as a idea concept works, but life advice as a, you have to understand that for some people that's a business, and that's how it works. So okay, that's that. But yeah, books, like right now I have this book. I don't find the flow really good. I don't really like find the flow really good. I do just want to go and, hey, give me the juiciest parts of this book, because I don't know if this book is written really nicely, because yeah, that's what happens when the writers come from academia. They could come up with a really good thesis about a really good idea. They could talk about really interesting things, but then it's not like beautiful to read. I also want something that's very engaging to read. So yeah, what is flow state? If flow state is engaged intensity, then it means that you are actually able to go down into this content and you are able to engage with it. And engage means you are intellectually engaging with it. Probably you are physically engaging, like hopefully you are also physically engaging with it. And that leads to that leads to flow state, and that is the peak state that humans want to be in. With social media, very short form, you're not able to engage, you're distracted, you're not able to choose your adventure, you are just consuming. With books, you are consuming. Video games are cool, but again, you are still operating in someone else's world. Ideally you want to create and craft your own world. So at the end of the day, again, businesses, you are kind of operating, yes, you are kind of operating in other people's world, ideally. So what you want is curiosity with AI, and hopefully live streaming. So I don't know, there might be more solutions, but right now this is looking like something which is pretty good setup, because hmm, you are able to really engage. And if gamification is a concept, a meta concept of gamification, which basically means that meeting you where you are, slowly giving you the right steps, then AI is the perfect way. That is not a limited world crafted by someone else. Because if you're playing GTA Vice City, you are like, oh, why can't I just crash into this car? Why doesn't it work like that? Because it's a world crafted by someone else and you are just a guest over there. But now with AI, you are able to constantly craft your own world, and that is something beautiful. And it is meeting you where you are. And as you spend more time with it, you get bored and you are like, give me more challenge, give me more challenge. And that leads to more and more, and that leads to this constant growth, because that leads to this constant growth. So yeah, I think, and curiosity is really important. So what's the idea over here? The idea over here is that it would be very interesting to work with people and be like, okay, if you are feeling that you are not really stimulated and you feel that your work is really soulless, what you truly need to do is put yourself into states like this where you are following your curiosity with AI, and you're also talking through it, and you have some sort of this live streaming setup so that you are kind of forced to make sense of everything that is happening. That is what happens when you have this observer effect. That means that it's pressure to keep work. It's not pressure, it's a good pressure. Just the fact that I have this observation happening over here, it is a good amount, it's the right amount of pressure to keep producing something that makes sense, to keep producing something that makes sense. You constantly are going into chaos, clarity, chaos, clarity, chaos, clarity, and you keep rising that. Okay, let's see this one. If Graeber's bullshit jobs and fake work theses are right, then a significant chunk of white collar labor isn't producing real value. It's box ticking, performative busyness, middle management overhead. internal reporting that nobody reads, meetings about meetings, and so on. The system tolerates it because until now there was no pressure mechanism to expose exactly how hollow those rules are. The exposure problem. When a team adopts AI and suddenly one person can do what five people were doing, it becomes very hard to hide that the other four weren't producing real output. They were producing the appearance of output. AI doesn't just increase efficiency, it makes the gap between real work and performative work measurable for the first time. A manager who used to take 2 days to write a strategy memo that nobody acted on now takes 20 minutes that nobody acted on. The question shifts from how long does it take to did anyone need this at all? The political resistance. Graeber's key insight was that bullshit jobs persist because they serve political and social functions, not economic ones. They give managers headcount, which equals status. They create layers that justify other layers, and they keep people busy enough not to ask dangerous questions. AI threatens all of that. So you would expect to see significant institutional resistance, not framed as we want to protect useless jobs, but as concerns about quality, oversight, compliance, and the human touch. A lot of the AI governance and policy discussions inside companies are partly genuine and partly this dynamic playing out. We want to protect useless jobs, but as concerns about quality, oversight, compliance, and the human touch. The uncomfortable surplus. If you generally strip out the fake work, you don't get a leaner company doing the same thing faster. You get a company that has to confront the fact that maybe 30 to 40% of its salaried workforce were essentially an elaborate jobs program. In the short term, the next year, most organizations won't actually fire those people. Instead, you'll see a strange limbo. People being redeployed, tasked with AI transformation initiatives, put on committees to study how AI should be adopted. A new layer of bullshit jobs about AI replacing bullshit jobs. The productivity paradox returns. Economists have long, like everything over here, you could say that that's a bullshit job. Somebody was like, even economist is a bullshit job. Have long noticed that technology investments don't always show up in productivity statistics. Graeber is right. One reason is that organizations absorb efficiency gains by creating new forms of waste rather than actually producing more with less. There's a real chance the same thing happens with AI. Companies adopt it enthusiastically. The tools genuinely work, but the organizational structure metabolizes the gains into new forms of complexity, reporting, and oversight. The individual reckoning. Like when you think about the entire luxury industry is kind of bullshit job, but it is framed as hospitality. the entire luxury industry is kind of bullshit job, but it is framed as hospitality. Very interesting. There's a real chance the same thing happens with AI. Companies adopt it enthusiastically. The tools generally work, but the organizational structure metabolizes the gains into new forms of complexity, reporting, and oversight. The individual reckoning. Perhaps the most human consequence. A lot of people quietly suspect their jobs are partly or mostly bullshit. AI makes the suspicion harder to suppress. If a tool can replicate 80% of what you do in minutes, you either find the 20% that's generally valuable and double down on it, or you face an existential crisis about what you've been doing with your professional life. That's not just an economic event, it's a psychological one. And I would expect to see it ripple through how people think about meaning, identity, and work over the coming year. The honest short answer, if both books are right, in the next year, won't so much solve the problem of fake work as it will make the problem impossible to ignore. And organizations will have to choose between genuinely restructuring, which is painful and politically costly, or finding creative new ways to absorb the surplus. History suggests most will choose the latter, at least initially. Yeah, what if we find that 99.999% of the jobs in the world are just bullshit jobs? And people figure out that the small little emails, every paperwork that they were worried about was something they shouldn't have worried too much about. Widespread job obsolescence realization. That's a really unsettling version of the question, and honestly, it's worth sitting with rather than dismissing. Because there's a version of this that's already happening in small ways. People are using AI to draft emails they used to agonize over for 45 minutes. And the recipient skims it in 10 seconds and replies, sounds good. Both people were performing a ritual. Neither needed. The email didn't need to be carefully crafted. The reply didn't need to be thoughtful. The entire exchange could have been a yes no checkbox, or could have not happened at all. Scale that up and you start to get a genuinely disorienting picture. Think about how much of the economic life is people creating work for other people who create work for other people. Legal reviews are documents that exist because of compliance requirements that exist because of previous legal disputes that existed because of ambiguities that nobody actually cared about. Reporting chains where someone compiles data so someone else can summarize it, so someone else can present it to someone who nods and moves on. Marketing campaigns optimized with A/B testing to sell marginal improvements on products that are functionally identical to competitors. Who nods and moves on. Marketing campaigns optimized with A/B testing to sell marginal improvements on products that are functionally identical to competitors who are running their own campaigns, entire industries, consulting, corporate training, consulting, most of HR, youth swaths of financial services, where if you really push on what is being produced here, the answer gets uncomfortably thin. Huge swaths of financial services. If he peels back that curtain and people collectively realize that a few things follow, the meaning crisis accelerates massively. Most adults in developed economies build their identity around their job. If you discover that the thing you sacrifice evenings, weekends, your health and time with your kids for was essentially nothing, that's not a minor adjustment, that's a civilizational therapy session. Most adults in developed economies build their identity around their job. If you discover that the thing you sacrifice evenings, weekends, your health and time with your kids for was essentially nothing, that's not a minor adjustment, that's a civilizational therapy session. People who spend decades climbing a ladder find out the building wasn't real. You would have to rediscover what actually matters. And this is where it gets interesting rather than just bleak. 99% of what we call work was theater. And the remaining 1%, the people growing food, maintaining infrastructure, caring for the sick, teaching children, building things, becomes properly visible and properly valued for maybe the first time. The inversion would be staggering. The farmer and the nurse were always more important than the associate vice president of strategic initiatives. The farmer and the nurse were always more important than the associate vice president of strategic initiatives. Everyone sort of knew it, but the whole system was organized to pretend otherwise. The economic logic breaks down. Our whole system distributes resources primarily through jobs. If most jobs are revealed as unnecessary, you can't just fire everyone. You would collapse demand. And then the businesses producing real things have no customers. You're staring directly at the need for some fundamentally different way of distributing resources. The everyone must have a job to deserve food and housing framework can survive the discovery that most jobs were fiction. The grief would be enormous. I think people underestimate this. Imagine being 55, having spent 30 years in corporate middle management and absorbing the realization that you could have spent those years doing almost anything else. Raising your kids more present, making art, building community, learning, resting. Raising your kids more present, making art, building community, learning, resting. And nothing of value would have been lost. That's not liberating, at least not at first. Social media. This is beautiful. So when I was working at XMTV, I always thought about this idea of collateral damage. If you want to build the next wave of something, that next wave of something comes with a lot of collateral damage. That next wave comes with a lot of collateral damage, and that's it. For social media, for the entire world today to be connected with social media, we needed massive amounts of collateral damage. There were multiple startups, multiple companies who tried to build something like this. Wow. Wow. It's it's very interesting if we keep digging deep into this. It's very interesting. If we keep digging deep into this. Okay. And nothing of value would have been lost. That's not liberating, at least not at first. At first, that's devastating. Liberation might come later for younger people who hear the message in time. The philosophical reversal. We have spent centuries building an ideology that says human worth is tied to productivity and economic contribution. If it turns out almost none of us were actually being productive in any meaningful sense, we were just keeping each other busy in an elaborate mutual performance, then that whole moral framework collapses, which might ultimately be healthy. But the transition would be chaotic. The really wild part is that some version of this might not even require AI to be true. Graeber's argument was that we already live in this world, we just can't see it because we are inside it. AI might just be the thing that makes the invisible visible. The kid who says the emperor has no clothes except the emperor is the entire global economy. And the small emails and paperwork you mentioned, that might be the entry point for most people. Not a grand theory, just a quiet personal realization. I spent years stressed about things that a machine can do in seconds, which means they were never hard, which means what I was actually doing. That question multiplied by a few billion people is probably the most consequential question of the next decade. Which means they were never hard, which means what I was actually doing. Extrapolate the scenario where a lot of people come to this realization that I spend years stressed about things that a machine can do in seconds, which means they were never hard, which means what was I actually doing? Extrapolate that and tell me what happens to the world. What does the world look like? What are the different sorts of reactions that people come up with? Very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let's walk through this. Billions of people over the course of a year or two gradually absorbing the same gut level realization, not as an abstract theory they read about, but as a felt experience. They watched a machine do their job and something broke inside their story about themselves. Here's what I think unfolds. The first wave is denial and doubling down. Like today, we have this technology that is good, but for this technology to happen, we had to go through a lot of collateral damage. Today, we have this mic, this computer, this camera, this table, this mouse, this keyboard. This is all technology, and we needed that. We needed that. A huge number of people, maybe the majority, first wave is denial, doubling down, initially refuse the implication. They insist that what they do is more nuanced than the machine understands. They start adding complexity to their work, more process, more review layers, more human oversight, not because it improves anything, but because it rebuilds the wall between them and the realization. You would see a strange counter movement, people deliberately making things less efficient to preserve the feeling that their contribution matters. Corporate culture would become even more ritualistic for a while. More meetings, not fewer. More elaborate frameworks. People clinging to the liturgy of work even as the faith drains out of it. The second wave is anger, and it goes in several directions at once. Some people get angry at AI companies. You stole the meaning from my life. Some get angry at employers. You knew these roles were pointless, and you let me waste my years. Some get angry at the economic system itself. I was told if I worked hard and played the game, I would earn my place, and the whole game was rigged. This is where things get politically volatile. That anger is legitimate, and it doesn't have an obvious target, which makes it dangerous. Populist movements would feed on it. You would see both left-wing versions, the system exploited us, and right-wing versions. Left-wing, system exploited us. Right-wing, the elites are replacing us. Drawing from the same well of betrayal. The third wave is depression, quiet and widespread. Not the kind that shows up in headlines, but the kind that shows up in therapist offices, in divorce rates, in drinking, in people staring at ceilings at 2 a.m. because the realization doesn't just challenge what you do, it challenges who you are. If you were a senior financial analyst for 20 years and a machine makes it obvious that most of what you did was elaborate pattern matching on spreadsheets that influenced decisions that were mostly already made, You don't just lose a job description, you lose the narrative that organized your entire adult life. I worked hard, I provided for my family, I was good at something difficult. Every piece of that sentence is now in question. Multiply that by hundreds of millions of people, and you have a mental health crisis unlike anything we have seen. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, a fourth wave starts to emerge. Some people, maybe initially a small minority, go through the grief and come out the other side with something that looks like relief. They start saying things like, okay, so that wasn't real. What is real? And they start experimenting. They start spending time on things that can be done by a machine. Not because those things are economically productive, but because they are genuinely meaningful. Deep relationships, raising children with actual presence instead of exhausted distraction, making things with their hands, local community, art that isn't content, art that isn't content, conversations that aren't networking, deep relationships, raising children with actual presence instead of exhausted distraction, making things with their hands, local community, art that isn't content, conversations that aren't networking, growing food, repairing things, being still. A subculture emerges that basically says we were in a cult. The cult was called career. We're out now. And they start building alternative ways of living, not dropping out in the 1960s countercultural sense, more pragmatic, more grounded, small scale, community oriented, focused on tangible reality rather than abstraction. Small scale, community oriented, focused on tangible reality rather than abstraction. Here's where society starts to fracture into recognizable tribes. The performers keep playing the old game. They use AI to be hyperproductive at work that may or may not matter. May or may not matter. They optimize, they hustle, they post about it. For them, the game was always the point. Status, competition, winning, and they don't need the work to be real in some deeper sense. It's like, It's very interesting. It's very interesting. I was thinking about today that we will create more games. We will create more competitions because competitions is exactly what we have done. Like what is F1? F1 is giving a constraint to a competition, and you just take this competition around the world, and it has created stories and culture and competition and more stories, and that's what people follow, and people just travel around the world for it. Wow. Wow. We're out now. And they start building alternative ways of living, not dropping out in the 1960s countercultural sense. More pragmatic, more grounded, small scale, community oriented, focused on tangible reality rather than abstraction. Here's where society starts to fracture into recognizable tribes. The performers keep playing the old game. They use AI to be hyperproductive at work that may or may not matter. They optimize, they hustle, they post about it. For them, the game was always the point: status, competition, winning, and they don't need the work to be real in some deeper sense. They adapt the fastest in conventional terms. They're fine, or they look fine. The resenters get stuck in the anger. They form political movements, some constructive and some destructive. They want someone to pay for the deception. They want the old system back, or they want it burned down, depending on temperament. They are a huge political force, and every party is trying to capture their energy. The searchers go looking for meaning elsewhere. Religion sees a resurgence, not necessarily traditional institutional religion, but spiritual seeking of all kinds. Philosophy becomes relevant again in a way it hasn't been for decades. Therapy becomes as normal as going to the gym. People start reading. Philosophy becomes relevant again in a way it hasn't been for decades. Religion sees a resurgence. Therapy becomes okay. People start reading, thinking, and talking about the questions that the busyness of fake work had kept them too distracted to ask. What is a good life? What do I owe other people? What am I here for? The builders start constructing new systems. They are the ones who say, okay, if most of the old economy was theater, let's build something real. They focus on physical infrastructure, local food systems, energy, care work, education. They tend to be practical and less interested in ideology. They just want to do things that obviously matter, things where you can point at the result and say that's real. that exist because of what I did. The hedonist decided if work was always fake, then the puritanical sacrifice was a scam. And they're going to enjoy themselves. They pursue pleasure, experience, leisure. Some do this in a healthy way, some don't, but the underlying logic is consistent. I was told to defer gratification for a career that turned out to be nothing. I am done deferring. So you want to be either a searcher, you want to be a builder, the frozen. So you either want to be a searcher or a builder. Searcher, builder, searcher, builder. You're always a builder. You're always a builder. Always focus on building. Searcher is part of building. Searcher is the learning part. And this might be the largest group, at least for a while, just don't know what to do. They keep showing up to whatever remains of their jobs, feeling hollow. They scroll their phones more. They are not angry enough to revolt, not brave enough to reinvent, not depressed enough to collapse. They are in limbo. They scroll their phones more. They're not angry enough to revolt, not brave enough to reinvent, not depressed enough to collapse. They are in limbo, waiting for someone or something to tell them what the new story is. This group is the real question mark, because where they eventually drift determines what kind of society comes next. What the world looks like in this scenario. Economically, you see a slow decoupling of having a job from having a life. Some version of UBI, universal basic services, becomes politically inevitable, not because of ideology, but because the alternative is hundreds of millions of people with no income and nothing to do, which is a recipe for revolution. The transition is ugly and contested. Culturally, prestige starts to migrate slowly, unevenly, but noticeably. The person who can build a house, grow food, cook a meal, raise a child well, hold a community together, these people start to be respected in a way that the management consultant were never really was. Even the consultant must pay 10 times more. What do? Stops being the first question at the party, or the question persists, but the answers change. I take care of my parents. I'm learning to make furniture. I don't really do anything right now, and I'm figuring out if that's okay. Psychologically, humanity goes through something like a collective adolescence. The childhood story. Okay, I have a question. And I think grok would be nicer. What are the latest developments around the world, around the different companies, how they have recently adapted to this abundance of knowledge and work through AI, as the modern AIs, as the latest models like Claude and Grok and ChatGPT are getting incredibly good at professional work. What is happening? What is actually happening? What are the consequences of it on a societal level, financial level, economic level, individual level, philosophical level, religion level, across the board, across the world, across the enterprises? Exploring AI adaptations. Okay, that's a really good question. Let's go. Culturally, prestige starts to migrate slowly, unevenly, but noticeably. The person who can build a house, grow food, cook a meal, raise a child, hold a community together, stops being the first question at a party, or the question persists, where the answers change. I take care of my parents. Psychologically, humanity goes through a collective adolescence. The childhood story, work hard, get ahead, that's what life is, breaks down, and for a while there's nothing to replace it. That in-between period is chaotic, painful, and also potentially the most creative and generative period in human history. Because when the old meaning structure collapses, everything is up for renegotiation, everything. The deepest change, if it happens, is that people stop confusing being busy with being alive. And that's terrifying, because busyness was the thing that kept most people from having to face the raw, open, unstructured question of what to do with their one life. Without that shield, people either grow up, really, truly grow up, or they find new ways to hide. Both will happen. The question is the ratio. I believe people will find their form of art and invest themselves in creating art every single day. That's a beautiful vision. I think there's something deeply true to it. Let me push on it a bit though, because I think the reality might be even more interesting than the simple version. What you're really saying is that art is the natural state, that humans, when freed from the artificial constraint of performing fake work for 8 to 10 hours a day, will default to making things. And there is real evidence for this. Look at what retired people do when they are healthy and financially secure. They paint, they garden, they write, they woodwork, they cook elaborate meals for people they love. They weren't doing those things because someone told them to. They were doing them because something inside them needed to create. And the definition of art here matters. You're not just talking about paintings and galleries. You're talking with a guy who spends 4 hours perfecting his sourdough because the crumb structure matters to him. The woman who arranges a garden not for Instagram but because the composition of colors brings her genuine satisfaction. The father who tells his kid an elaborate bedtime story that he improvises fresh every night. The person who writes code not for a corporation but because they want to build something elegant. Someone who fixes motorcycles not as a job but as a practice, in the almost spiritual sense. What you're describing is humans returning to craft with a careful, patient, intrinsically motivated act of making something with attention and care. And that might be our deepest nature, deeper than economics, deeper than career ambition, deeper than all the structures we built on top of it. Here's what makes your version compelling. For most of human history, this is actually what people did. The idea that you go somewhere and do abstract symbolic work for salary is incredibly recent. You go somewhere and do abstract symbolic work for a salary is incredibly recent, maybe 200 years old at most. Before that, people made things, they built, they grew, they wove, they sang, they told stories, they cooked, they forged. Every culture on earth developed art independently. They built, they grew, they wove, they sang, they told stories, they cooked, they forged. Every culture on earth developed art independently. Nobody had to incentivize it. Nobody created a department of art and assigned KPIs. People just made things because that's what humans do when you leave them alone. It's very interesting. This reminds me of the fact that US is doing some good stuff in adding more art to their public infrastructure. But it's very interesting. It's like if you look at the Romans and how the Greeks, the Romans, how they thought about architecture, beauty was not an extra thought. Beauty was part of the architecture. It was beauty, utility, and one more thing I forgot. But yeah, it's not that you only focus on utility, you also focus on beauty. That is important. But it's true. As the world grew, as the civilization grew, we needed a way to grow fast. So it's okay that we didn't look at beauty because we were like, hey, let's build fast. Let's build faster. They wove sets, they sang, they told stories, they cooked and forged. Every culture on earth developed art independently. Nobody had to incentivize it. Nobody created a department of art and assigned KPIs. People just made things. The industrial economy didn't create human productivity. It captured it and redirected it into forms that were legible to capital. The factory took the craftsman and turned him into an operator. The industrial economy didn't create human productivity, it captured it and redirected it into forms that were legible to capital. The factory took the craftsman and turned him into an operator. The corporation took the storyteller and turned her into a marketing specialist. AI might be the thing that accidentally reverses the entire capture. But here's where I would push back gently on the optimistic version. The obstacle isn't that people lack the impulse to create, it's that most people have had that impulse beaten out of them by decades of conditioning. A 45-year-old who spent their entire adult life in corporate environments may have completely lost touch with whatever their art was going to be. They were probably told around age 12 or 13 that their drawing wasn't good enough. or their music wasn't serious, or their writing wouldn't make money, and they filed that part of themselves away and never went back. So the transition isn't people stop working and start making art. The transition is people stop working, go through a period of terrifying emptiness where they don't know who they are without a job title. And then, if they're brave enough and supported enough, slowly, awkwardly start to recover the creative impulse that was always there underneath. Period of terrifying emptiness where they don't know who they are without a job title. And then, if they are brave enough and supported enough, slowly, awkwardly start to recover the creative impulse that was always there underneath. That recovery process is itself a kind of art. Learning to sit with a blank page, a lump of clay, an empty afternoon, and not panic. Learning to do something badly and keep going. Learning that the product matters less than the practice. That the point of making bread isn't the bread, it's the making. I think this is exactly it. When Aditya Agarwal mentioned about that AI has taken over coding, the craft that he perfected for years, it was never about the coding, it was how that practice of coding every single day changed him and his life and his perspective. If your vision plays out, the world doesn't become a utopia masterpieces, it becomes a world where most people spend most of their time doing things that are absorbing. That's the word I would use instead of productive or even creative. Absorbing, the state where you lose track of time because you are fully engaged with something that has your complete attention. The state where you lose track of time because you're fully engaged with something that has your complete attention. Psychologists call it flow. Craftspeople just call it work, but the real kind. The kind that doesn't need a manager or deadline to justify itself. And the economy that would grow around that is fascinating to imagine. Not mass production, millions of small batch, distinctive human-made things, not content, but actual expression. Not the creator economy as it exists now, which is mostly performing for algorithms, but something more like a global village of makers who trade what they make. Some of it would be trivial, some of it would be transcendent, most of it would just be human, made with care by someone who was paying attention. The deepest thing is what you are saying might be this: we never needed to be useful, we needed to be engaged. The deepest thing is that is in what you were saying might be this: we never needed to be useful, we needed to be engaged. The economy confused those two things and we spent a century optimizing for the wrong one. If AI corrects that error, even accidentally, it might be the most important thing technology ever did. Not by what it creates, but by what it frees. The deepest thing is in what you were saying might be this: we never needed to be useful, we needed to be engaged. The economy confused those two things and we spent a century optimizing for the wrong one. If AI corrects that error even accidentally, it might be the most important thing technology ever did. Not by what it creates, but what it frees. Wow. Tell me more about the creator economy today in the same thread. What is, based on this thesis that we are talking about, what is wrong with the creator economy of today? I think when I think about this, I'm like, okay, yes, like I have a buddy and he just posted a TikTok, a very basic TikTok, and he got like thousands of views or something. And he's like, I don't care about this. I don't care about this because, yeah, I don't care about this. And on the other hand, for me, we do these super long live streams, 3 hours, and then every single person who messages, we connect with them, and we are able to build these really strong, deep friendships together. And that is crazy. That is crazy. That is crazy. So I think this is also very interesting. What do brands want? Do brands want a person who has millions of followers, but who nobody really looks at. Nobody truly gets inspired by them, or do they want these few people who create so, like, who go so deep into something that they're able to build these deep relationships, and then people actually listen to them. That's also very interesting. This is where the thread gets really sharp, because the creator economy is supposed to be the answer to everything we have been talking about. It was marketed as liberation: quit your bullshit job, become your own boss, make what you love, build an audience, and yet something about it feels deeply wrong. And the thesis we have been building explains exactly why. Took the impulse you described, the humans wanting to make things, immediately re-enclose it inside the same logic it was supposed to escape. It took art and turned it back into a job. Except now it's a worse job because you don't even get benefits. Here's what went wrong. The audience became the boss. In a real creative practice, you make something because it demands to be made. You follow your curiosity, your obsession, your weird private fascination. The creator economy inverted that. Now you make what the audience wants. You check analytics. You study what performs. You A/B test your thumbnails. You optimize your posting schedule. You have escaped the corporate manager only to replace them with something far more tyrannical. Wow, this reminds me of Mr. Beast. What is Mr. Beast? Mr. Beast is basically a corporate. He's not art. That's corporate. He's not making what he wants, he's making what the algorithm wants. He literally has a CEO. You optimize your posting schedule. You have escaped the corporate manager only to replace them with something far more tyrannical. An algorithm that gives you real-time performance reviews every single day publicly in the form of view counts. A corporate job at least had the decency to evaluate you quarterly. The algorithm evaluates you every hour. And unlike a human boss, you can reason with it. You can build a relationship with it. And it feels nothing about destroying you. Creation became content. And this is maybe the most important corruption. There's a difference between making something and producing content. A person who spends 6 months on a novel is making something. A person who posts writing tip every day on TikTok is producing content. Content is defined by its consumability. It has to be fast, frictionless, optimized for retention. Art often asks you to slow down, to sit with discomfort, to stay with something that doesn't immediately reward you. The creator economy systematically selects against that. It rewards the easily digestible and punishes the genuinely challenging. So creators learn to sand down every rough edge, every difficulty, every demand they might place on the audience. They learn to flatter instead of provoke, and they call this finding their niche. They learn to flatter instead of provoke, and they call this finding their niche. Wow. The hustle just changed costumes. Look at what a successful creator life actually looks like. They wake up, check metrics, they plan content calendars, they have brand deals to fulfill, sponsors to please, engagement to maintain. They're anxious about the algorithm changing. They batch produce content on weekends. They talk about scaling. They hire teams. They build funnels. They worry about churn. Does any of this sound like liberation? It sounds exactly like the corporate job they left, except lonelier, less stable, and with the added indignity of having to pretend they are living their dream in every post. The creator economy didn't free people from bullshit work, it franchised bullshit work and rebranded it as self-expression. Oh no. Authenticity became a performance. This is the most psychologically corrosive part. The creator economy demands that you be yourself as a monetization strategy. Share your struggles, be vulnerable, show the real you, but the moment authenticity becomes a tactic for engagement, it's no longer authenticity. It's a performance of authenticity, which is actually further from honesty than a corporate employee who at least knows they are wearing a mask. The creator who cries on camera about their burnout and then checks how many views the crying video got is trapped in a hall of mirrors. They can no longer locate the boundary between their genuine self and their brand. That's not freedom, that's a new and more intimate form of alienation. At least the office worker got to keep their inner life private. It manufactured artificial scarcity out of something abundant. human creativity is essentially infinite. Everyone can make things, but the creator economy is built on the platform model, which requires a power law distribution of few winners and millions of losers. The platforms need superstars because superstars drive traffic. So the system takes this universal human capacity and turns it into a competition where 99% of participants functionally fail. And the 1% who succeed are rewarded not for making the best things, but for being the most platform compatible. The person making the most interesting art in the world might have 200 followers because what they do doesn't translate to short form video. Meanwhile, someone doing something mediocre but algorithmically optimized has millions. The creator economy didn't democratize art, it built a new hierarchy and claimed it was a meritocracy. It built a new hierarchy and claimed it was a meritocracy. Wow, this is really good. It collapsed the space between creation and consumption. Real creative practice requires a kind of privacy. A period where the thing you are making is just for you, where it's unfinished and ugly and uncertain and you are working through it without anyone watching. The creator economy eliminated that space entirely. Now you were supposed to build in public, share your process, document the journey. Every sketch is a potential post. Every half-formed thought is a potential thread. The work never gets to exist in that protected, messy, private state where most of the real creative breakthroughs happen. You're performing creation rather than actually doing it. The rehearsal became the show. Now here's how this connects back to a larger thesis. The creator economy is the most sophisticated version of what Graeber was describing. Completely internalize its own mythology. They're following their passion, living authentically, doing what they love. So when it feels hollow, when they're churning out their 400th video and feeling nothing, they can't even name the problem. They think the problem is them. I must not be passionate enough. I need to find my why. I need better systems. They turn to other creators for advice or sell them courses about how to create more effectively, which is itself content, which is itself a bullshit job. It's bullshit all the way down. Wow. But wearing the face of meaning. What you were describing earlier, people finding their art, is almost the opposite of the creator economy. It will be people creating without an audience, without analytics, without a monetization strategy. Making bread that only their family eats, writing poems that live in a notebook, building a chair that sits on the porch, playing guitar in the living room at midnight, badly, joyfully for no one. The creator economy's fundamental error was assuming that the value of creation comes from its distribution, that making something only counts if other people see it, engage with it, validate it with their attention. But the thing you're pointing toward is the idea that creation is valuable in the act itself. And the point of making bread is how it feels to knead dough. The point of writing is how it feels to find the right word. The point of playing music is the sound filling the room you are in right now. If that's true, and I think it is, then the creator economy didn't just fail to solve the problem. It is the problem, wearing a more appealing mask. You try to paint a very idealistic picture where someone is playing guitar in their living room at midnight for no one. Someone is building a chair that sits on their porch. Somebody is writing poems that live in a notebook. Somebody's making a bread that only their family eats. But the point of art is connection. An artist makes art because that practice changes them. That practice is therapeutic. And at the end, their art is also a gift to humanity, to other people. And it's a way to connect with other people, where other people appreciate their art, where other people appreciate the story behind their art. Yes, that is right. That is right. Solitary creative practice with art's ultimate You're right, and that's an important correction because I overcorrected. I was so focused on diagnosing what the creator economy got wrong that I swung to the opposite extreme and romanticized the solitary artist, the hermit in the cabin making beautiful things for nobody. And that's its own kind of fantasy. It's the mirror image of the creator economy's distortion, not the solution to it. What you're pointing at is that creation has two movements, and you need both. The first movement is inward. You make the thing, and the making changes you. The potter at the wheel isn't just shaping clay, the clay is shaping them. The writer doesn't just put thoughts on paper, the writing reveals thoughts they didn't know they had. The guitarist playing at midnight isn't performing, they are processing something they couldn't access through words. The guitarist playing at midnight isn't performing, they are processing something they couldn't access through words. That's the therapeutic dimension. The practice as transformation, and yes, that part is private and sacred and shouldn't be corrupted by metrics. But the second movement is outward, and this is where I was wrong to stop, because the chair you build wants to be sat in by someone you love. The bread wants to be torn apart at a table with other people. The poem wants to be read by someone who reads it and feels less alone. The song wants to land in another person's body and make them feel something they couldn't reach on their own. Art that never completes that second movement is incomplete. It's half a breath, an inhale with no exhale. And this is actually what makes art different from mere self help or private therapy. Therapy heals you, art heals you, and then offers that healing to someone else. The artist goes through something, metabolizes it into form, and then hands that form to another human who receives it and recognizes something true in it. Art heals you and then offers that healing to someone else. The artist goes through something, metabolizes it into form, and then hands that form to another human who receives it and recognizes something true in it. The recognition, you felt that too, is maybe the most powerful experience humans can give each other. It's the antidote to isolation, not connection in this shallow social media sense of likes and followers, but the deep ancient sense of one human saying, "Here, I made this. It came from something real inside of me." And another human saying, "I see it, I feel it, it matters." So the real problem with the creator economy isn't that it involved sharing your work. The problem is it reversed the order and corrupted the motive. In healthy creation, the sequence is you feel something, you make something out of what you felt, and then you share it because the sharing completes the circuit. The gift wants to be given, the audience comes after the impulse, and the audience receives something that existed before they were considered. The audience comes after the impulse, and the audience receives something that existed before they were considered, that existed before they were considered. The creator economy reversed it. Now the sequence is you study what the audience wants. You feel what you need to feel in order to produce that. And you make the thing that was pre-optimized for reception. You study what the audience wants. You feel what you need to feel in order to produce that. And you make the thing that was pre-optimized for reception. The audience comes before the impulse. You're not sharing a gift, you are filling an order. And both parties can feel the difference even if they can't name it. That's why so much content feels hollow even when it's well produced. The human circuitry that detects genuine offering versus calculated performance is incredibly sensitive. People know when they are being given a gift versus being sold something. They might not be able to articulate how they know what they know. And here's what your correction opens up. It's actually much more radical than what I was saying before. If art is fundamentally about connection, if the gift needs to be received to be complete, then what we actually need isn't the creator economy, and it isn't solitary creation. It's something that has barely existed at scale in modern life. Genuine creative community. If the gift needs to be received to be complete, then what we actually need isn't the creator economy and it isn't solitary creation. It's something that has barely existed at scale in modern life, genuine creative community. Spaces where people make things and share them with each other. not for metrics or money or status, but because sharing is how the art becomes itself. But because sharing is how the art becomes itself. The open mic night where nobody's trying to get discovered. The writing group where and share them with each other, not for metrics or money or status, but because sharing is how the art becomes itself. Where people read their work aloud and the room holds it. The neighborhood where someone bakes and leaves it on your porch and leave a painting on theirs. The dinner party where someone plays a song they wrote and it's a bit rough and everyone feels something and nobody records it. That's what humans did for tens of thousands of years. Art was communal before it was commercial. Art was communal before it was commercial. Songs belonged to villages before they belonged to record labels. Stories belonged to firesides before they belonged to publishers. The entire apparatus of professional art, the industry, the gatekeepers, the distribution machinery, and now the platforms inserted itself between the maker and the community and convinced both sides they needed a middleman. The industry, the gatekeepers, the distribution machinery, and now the platforms inserted itself between the maker and the community and convinced both sides they need a middleman. What you're describing, if I'm hearing you right, is a removal of the middleman, not to isolate the artist, but to restore the direct connection. A person makes something that changed them, and they hand it to another person, and it changes that person too. No algorithm, no monetization strategy, no analytics dashboard. Just the ancient human loop. I made this. It's for you. Did you feel it? Yes, I felt it. And if AI frees people from bullshit work and they find their art and they share it in that direct human way, then what you're actually describing isn't just a change in how people spend their time. It's the restoration of something we lost so gradually we forget it was ever there. The original human economy, which was an economy of gifts before it was an economy of commodities. It's a much bigger idea than people will make art. It's that people will make art for each other and doing so rebuild the connective tissue that the modern economy quietly dissolved. Wow. Extrapolate how this would look like in 1 year with the abundance of AI. Let's go back to Grok and see what's the response over here. Boom. From experimental tools to integral components of business, governance, daily life, frontier models, Anthropic XAI have advanced in reasoning, multimodality, and agentic capabilities, meaning AI systems that can plan, execute tasks, and adapt autonomously. These models are now proficient in professional workflows, from code generation to complex decision making, often outperforming humans in specialized tasks. Globally, AI adoption is accelerating, with spending projected to exceed $2 trillion this year, driven by infrastructure like data centers and chips. China leads in scale AI deployment due to centralized curation. While the US dominates in innovation but faces internal divisions, key trends: AI shifting from passive assistants to proactive agents. Whoa, what is this? Oh, that's just... I have a thesis that this entire US versus China and US versus other country thing is all made up. It's just a way for military companies to raise more capital every other company to raise more capital, government to keep getting stricter. What do you think? Yeah, this is weird. The spending projected to exceed 2 trillion this year, driven by infrastructure like data centers and chips. China leads in scale AI deployment due to centralized curation. Agents as first-class users. A fusion of cloud models with enterprise servers extending to physical robotics in factories. Industry shifting from generative AI to agentic AI. The next major step is fusing public cloud frontier models. Invisibly into apps, boosting efficiency without standalone interfaces. Standardizing adoption. Platforms like Microsoft Copilot agents enable custom builds, while governance tools become essential for ethics and compliance. Energy demands are surging, with AI infrastructure contributing up to 0.5% to US GDP growth. Startups and competition. Watch firms like Bastion model labs at any scale for deployment ease. Chinese models are closing gaps with Western ones. Revenue goals for OpenAI and Anthropic are on track, hitting 15 billion amid compute clusters, scaling to gigawatt levels. Partner for teamwork and security. NVIDIA advances computing platforms for cost-effective training. OpenAI as operator and Anthropic's tools raise governance questions. PwC notes top-down strategies for agentic workflows and finance, HR, IT organizations are reinventing training for agents with champions and prompt libraries evolving. Reinventing training for agents with champions and prompt libraries evolving. Startups adaptation AI optimized datasets for reasoning and multilingual use. Consequences across levels. AI's abundance of knowledge and work capabilities is reshaping society, but outcomes are paradoxical, exacerbating inequalities, enhancing collaboration within groups, but eroding trust between them. Capital share rise is eroding labor, taxes, welfare, states. Productivity gains are uneven. Value capture concentrating tech firms. Job net gain. Transitions favor elite workers. Hands-on roles may outlast knowledge ones. Bubble risk. Deflation if enterprise demand falters. Markets, wealth effects from AI stocks. Digital finance cuts cost. Negative verification cost soar from AI spam scams. Inequality, elite leverage. One worker absorbs multiple roles. Psychological feeling unnecessary for average workers. For decades, the message was, use your brain so you do not have to work with your hands. Now the inversion arrives. Hands remain expensive because the real world resists abstraction. Language work gets it first because symbols are easier to compress than atoms. Prestige hierarchy starts to scramble. The bartender may be safer than the junior analyst. The electrician may be safer than the copywriter. The nurse aide may be safer than the paralegal. This is a cultural earthquake because data systems are built on Assumptions about which forms of work are advanced. AI is about to embarrass a lot of those assumptions. This is about concentration. One highly capable worker with AI can absorb the output of several weaker roles. This means the premium on elite humans rises while the floor beneath average knowledge worker falls out. Small number of highly leveraged operators, larger number of people fighting over the scraps around them. People can tolerate rich people. What they cannot tolerate is feeling structurally unnecessary. Emotional core of the coming rupture. And the most chilling part is that institutions will try to narrate over it. They will say the labor market is resilient. They will say technology always creates new jobs. They will say adaptation is possible. This is just another transition. Some of that will be technically true, but the lived sequence will still be brutal. They are experienced biographically at 22, 27, 31. At the moment someone realizes the path they were sold no longer exists, that realization changes a civilization. What fragments trust between them? World of small network states versus superstates like China. Job displacement risk, a crisis of purpose, with rising malaise, drug abuse, inequality. Youth adoption surges with energy demands, widen inequalities. Upskilling is key for retention, with AI fluency mandatory. AI frees time for creativity but erodes agency. Reliance on AI for decisions risks loss of identity. Early career workers in exposed jobs face weaker earnings. Adaptation demands soft skills like discernment. Transitions feel brutal, reshaping life paths. Increasingly used to guide decisions, academic, financial, medical, and even spiritual. Students rely on it to shape arguments. Pastors consult it for sermon outlines. Families use it to answer moral questions. It calculates probability. Human uniqueness. What defines us if machines simulate intelligence? It boosts intra-tribe productivity but raises questions of agency and trust. Transhumanism promotes merging humans with AI, rejecting human limits, while critics call for renewed enlightenment values. Inequality becomes existential, feeling structurally unnecessary. AI re-enchants via techno-religion. Transhumanists view AI as godlike, enabling immortality or singularity. Christian perspectives emphasize imago Dei, human image of God. Stewardship and AI as tool, not replacement. Conferences explore AI and evangelism, but warn of demonic implications or illusions of God. Your thesis taps into long-standing critique of geopolitics, often linked to ideas like the military-industrial complex. Pentagon's budget hit over 800 billion in recent years. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing seeing stock surges during escalations. Push for subsidies for protectionism. CHIPS Act. 452 billion to US semiconductor makers. amid fears of Chinese dominance benefiting Intel, TSMC's, US ops, others. Non-military companies like those and rare earths or EV ride the wave. Tesla and others have lobbied for tariffs on Chinese imports, boosting their market edge. Government control. Wolf warrior diplomacy. Subsidies for state-owned enterprises. US has imposed tariffs and bans not for show. Apple have lost billions in market access due to these frictions. Maneuvers that could escalate accidentally. Think tanks like R&D or CSIS model, potentially conflict zones, not profit schemes. Kernel of truth. Rivalries are often exaggerated or prolonged to benefit powerful interests, creating a self-perpetuating loop of fear, funding, control. It's not unlike how the Cold War enriched defense firms and the masking domestic issues. Can I give another view that is neither zero or infinity for AI? AI boosts productivity within the trusted tribe but reduces economic trust between tribes. Within a tribe, you can share context storage across your archives, be more digitally autarkic than you ever were before. In the fullness of time, you can also script robots to build for you in the physical world. However, between tribes, we'll see an onslaught of AI spam and scams. From AI sales and marketing calls to AI slop websites to fake AI resumes, there are crypto countermeasures for this, but even those reduce to Web3 of trust. That is, you have to trust the person who's cryptographically asserting to you that a particular AI photo is real. In short, AI may radically increase productivity within tribes, but also radically reduce trust between tribes. Cost for verification, proctoring, and vetting are soaring. AI may therefore break almost as many markets as it enables. China may be the major exception to this rule, as it can simply centrally curate the Chinese internet to disallow AI fakery. As a consequence, it could have the largest scale cooperative tribe on earth in the digital age. The Democrats can do that as they hate AI. Republicans can do that as they hate the idea of Chinese digital borders. Democrats and Republicans are also fighting each other, so they're likely a large American trusted tribe in the age. Small aligned tribes, far more productive than ever before. The future could look like 1,000 Estonias in China, 1,000 million person network states, and a 1 billion person superstate. defense tech gonna moon. Okay, let's look at this one. 1 year from now, let's make this concrete. AI has gotten good enough that most knowledge work takes a fraction of the time it used to. Companies have either laid people off or more commonly quietly reduced hours while maintaining the pretense of full-time employment. Millions of people now have something they haven't had in their adult lives: unstructured time. Not vacation, not unemployment, not retirement, just hours in the day that don't belong to anyone else. The first few months are rough. People don't know what to do with themselves. They feel guilty for not being busy. They scroll more. They feel a low-grade anxiety they can't name. Some people fill their time with consumption. More streaming, more shopping, more noise. Consumption has a ceiling. You can only watch so many hours of television before your body starts to protest. Not built to be passive for long stretches. Something starts to itch. This is the crucial phase. A guy who hasn't drawn since he was 14 buys a sketchbook. A woman who always said she would learn ceramics signs up for a class at the community center. Someone pulls a grandfather's old tools out of the garage and starts sanding a piece of wood with no plan. The important thing about this phase is that almost everything people make is terrible, and that's the point. They are relearning something the economy trained out of them, the ability to do something without being good at it, without optimizing it, without it needing to justify its existence through quality or output. But they can't stay alone with it for long. This is your point. The guy with the sketchbook draws something that surprises him, and his first impulse is to show someone, not post it. Show someone, specific person, his daughter, his neighbor, his old friend. Look at this. I don't know what it is, but I made it. That moment, the vulnerable offering of something imperfect to someone specific is the atom of the gift economy. And it starts happening everywhere quietly. Now below the radar of any economic measurement. AI becomes the accelerator rather than just the liberator. People start using AI not to replace their creativity, but to bridge the gap between their vision and their current skill level. The woman learning ceramics uses AI to understand glaze chemistry, so she doesn't have to spend 2 years learning it through trial and error. The guy with the sketchbook uses AI to understand perspective and composition, so his next drawing gets closer to what he sees in his head. The person building furniture uses AI to solve the engineering problem so they can focus on the design. AI becomes the master craftsperson's apprenticeship compressed, not replacing the hands-on learning, but removing the gatekeeping that used to make craft inaccessible. You no longer need to go to art school or find a mentor or spend a decade in someone's workshop before you can make something worth sharing. The path from impulse to competence shortens dramatically. Small gifting circles start forming, not all in communities in the current sense, something more physical, more local, more real. A neighborhood where one person bakes, another person makes candles, another person does woodwork, and they simply give these things to each other. No marketplace, no Etsy shop, no pricing strategy, just I made this and I thought of you. At first it feels awkward because we have been so thoroughly trained to think in transactions. Someone receives a handmade cutting board and their first instinct is, what do I owe you? And the answer, nothing. I just wanted to make it and I wanted you to have it. It's so foreign that it almost feels suspicious, but it starts to catch on because it feels good in a way that buying things never did, both for the giver and the receiver. The story between the object starts to matter more than the object. This is a subtle but massive shift. When you buy a cutting board from Amazon, it has a story. It has no story. When your neighbor gives you one and says, I made this from a walnut tree that came down in the storm last March, and I've been learning to work with hand tools, and this is the first one I'm actually proud of. The cutting board is now alive with meaning. You don't just use it. You think of them every time you use it. The object has become a vessel for relationship, and this is something the industrial economy almost completely destroyed. The idea that objects carry the presence of the person who made them. Mass production gave us abundance of things and scarcity of meaning. The gift economy reverses that. Mass production gave us abundance of things and scarcity of meaning. It enables a new kind of creative cross-pollination. Someone writes a short story. They share it with a friend who's a musician who reads it and composes something inspired by it. They share the story and the music with a friend who does visual art, who creates something in response. None of these people are professionals. None of them are trying to build an audience. They are just responding to each other through making. AI helps at every stage, cleaning up the recording, helping with the mix, suggesting color palettes, solving technical problems, but the impulse and the meaning are entirely human. You start to see these little creative chains popping up. Someone makes something, it moves someone else. They make something in response. Art as conversation rather than broadcast. Suggesting color palettes, solving technical problems. But the impulse and the meaning are entirely human. Local economies of generosity start to develop structure, not formal structure, not institutions, more like norms and rhythms. A neighborhood develops a tradition where every Sunday people bring what they made that week to someone's porch. It's not a market, nothing is priced. You bring what you made and you take what speaks to you. The baker brings bread, the woodworker brings spoons, the knitter brings scarves, someone who's been learning letterpress brings prints, someone who can make physical objects brings a performance, a song, a story, a meal prepped on the spot. The currency isn't money, it's attention, the recognition that someone spent hours of their life making something and then gave it away. That act of recognition, seeing the labor and the love in the object, becomes the social fabric. Now, here's the part that challenges every economic assumption we have. This starts to be enough for people, not for everything. They still need housing, healthcare, infrastructure, the things that require coordination at scale. But for a surprising amount of daily life, the gift economy starts to meet needs that the market economy met poorly or not at all. The need to feel useful, the need to be seen, the need to give, the need to be seen, the need to give, the need to receive something made with care, the need to belong to a community where your presence matters. The market economy addressed none of these. I gave you a salary and told you to buy substitutes for all of them. The gift economy addresses them directly. Wow. Is there a book called The Gift Economy? I think there is. How the creative spirit transforms the world. A masterpiece. Imagination and the erotic life of property. Wow. Not a market economy. A gift gains value by circulating, not by being hoarded. Artists create partly from an inner necessity. When an artist shares, it becomes a gift that connects people. Value comes from price, value comes from circulation, transactions, relationships, ownership, exchange of meaning. Value comes from circulation. Hyde studied poets, indigenous cultures, and folklore to show that creative work historically moved as gifts within communities. Sacred economics. Industrial capitalism separated humans from community. A future economy may combine money systems with gift culture. Digital abundance could push society toward more sharing and less scarcity logic. Eisenstein literally talks about a modern revival of gift economies. Debt. David Graeber. The first 5,000 years. For most of human history, gift-like systems and social credit came before markets. Early societies operated more like I help you today, you help me later, not strict price transactions. The deep insight behind all three. The market economy asks, what is this worth? The gift economy asks, who is this for? The tiny shift changes everything. A loaf of bread sold in a store is product. A loaf of bread baked for a friend is a gift. Same bread, different universe. Why a conversation thread actually lands on the same insight. What you were describing earlier, people making art, sharing it with others, connection through creation, was almost exactly Lewis Hyde's thesis. Connection through creation, sharing it with others. Art lives in a gift economy even inside a market society. Artists to stay sane usually keep one foot in each world. Market to survive, gift to stay alive creatively. If you want, I can also show you something fascinating. Why the internet accidentally created a proto gift economy 15 years and why the creator economy broke it. Yes. ChatGPT is getting really better at all the recommendations and suggestions, which is very interesting. Okay. Close this for now. The need to feel useful, the need to feel seen, the need to give, the need to receive something made with care, the need to belong to a community, the need to belong to a community where your presence matters. The market economy addressed none of these. I gave you a salary and told you to buy substitutes for all of them. The gift economy addresses them directly. The cultural status hierarchy starts to visibly invert. Within a year, you probably won't see a complete inversion, but you will see the early signs. The person in the neighborhood who's most respected isn't the one with the highest paying job. It's the person who makes the most generous and thoughtful gifts. The person whose bread everyone looks forward to. The person who built a little free library and keeps it stocked. The person who noticed someone was struggling and quietly left something on their doorstep. Status starts to accrue to generosity and craft rather than accumulation and title. It's still early and fragile and coexists with the old hierarchy, but people can feel the shift. The meaning crisis begins to resolve not through ideology or philosophy or therapy, though all of those help. It resolves through practice. People who are spiraling in existential doubt 6 months ago are now getting up in the morning with something to do that matters to them. They're making something, they're giving it to someone, that someone's face lights up. That's enough. It turns out meaning was never something you could find by thinking about it. It was something you generated by doing things with care and offering them to others. The gift completes the self completes the gift. What AI's role looks like by the end of the year, it becomes the invisible infrastructure. Like electricity, nobody talks about it much anymore. It handles the logistical layer of life. Invisible infrastructure like electricity, nobody talks about it much anymore. It handles the logistical layer of life, the scheduling, the bureaucracy, the information management, the technical problem solving so that humans can focus on the thing they are apparently built to do, make things for each other with love and attention. It hadn't replaced human creativity, it cleared the space around it. It removed the thicket of fake work and artificial complexity that was blocking the path between a person and their craft, between a maker and their community, The world doesn't look like a utopia, it's messy and uneven, and the old system is still thrashing. But in pockets, in neighborhoods, in small communities around the world, something ancient is reassembling itself. People making, people giving, people receiving with gratitude, people making something in return. The oldest economy, the one that was there before money, before markets, before corporations, before all of it. Nobody organized it, nobody designed it, no policy made it happen. People just remember what they were for. People just remember what they were for. The early internet, the accidental gift economy. Bloggers writing essays, musicians uploading tracks to forums, programmers releasing open source software, photographers posting on Flickr, writers posting stories on personal blogs. No algorithm deciding visibility, no monetization dashboard, no creator strategy. I made this, maybe someone out there will like it. People reciprocated. Readers left thoughtful comments. Strangers translated posts. Programmers improved code. Fans remixed art. It behaved exactly like a gift economy. You gave something to the internet gave something back. Platform era, the attention economy. Platforms turned sharing into competition. Suddenly creators could see views, likes, subscriber growth, watch time, retention curves. What was once a conversation became a scoreboard. Creators stopped asking, what do I want to make? They started asking, what performs? Shorter, louder, more frequent, easier to consume, not necessarily deeper. This is when creation slowly became content production. In the creative economy, art as labor. Now creators operate like mini startups. Idea generation, analytics research, content calendar, filming, editing, thumbnail optimization, posting schedule, engagement management, sponsor negotiations. It looks suspiciously like a job. The paradox: the internet promised everyone can create, and that happened. The platforms required scarcity to function. Only a small percentage of creators can receive most of the attention. This creates the familiar power law distribution. 1% succeed massively, 9% survive, 90% produce for almost no audience. So creativity became competitive again, just like careers. Now enter AI. AI does something unusual to the system. It dramatically lowers the cost of creation itself. You can now write music, design visuals, edit video, code tools, compose stories with almost no technical barrier. So the scarcity shifts. Before AI, the scarce things was production skill. After AI, the scarce thing becomes taste, authenticity, perspective, real human experience, being a human with a story. This evolves the way many thinkers suspect. The internet may split into two parallel worlds: algorithmic entertainment, AI generated media, hyper optimized content, infinite scroll entertainment, human gift networks, small circles of genuine exchange, artist sharing with communities, niche creative groups, local maker culture, collaborative projects, less broadcast, more reciprocity. Small but deeply connected audience, direct relationships, slower work, fewer posts, stronger meaning, almost like digital villages, not mass fame, but genuine connection. It's not pure content, it's closer to a digital campfire. People gathering to think, explore ideas, create meaning together. That's actually closer, much closer to the gift economy of art. How can I craft the gift economy of art using AI, using the abundance of AI? Discerning practical paths. Let's see, what can we do? Yeah, now that we can start creating things, what can we create? If we can create anything, what do we create? Very interesting. A platform or tool that enables this for others. A local community movement in my area. Personal creative practice using AI. Framework or manifesto that others can follow. And I want to make sure I give you something generally useful rather than more philosophy. I already make art and want to share it differently. Let's see. A platform or two. Where are you starting from? I already make art and want to share it differently. I'm starting from scratch on all of it. Let's see. And this is something that Claude does pretty well. The asking questions, that how can we ask you more questions to get more relevance, and then maybe go from there. Today, one other book that I came across was from David Lynch on consciousness and his filmmaking stuff, which was again very interesting stuff. With the ambition to build this for others, let me lay out what I think this actually is, how AI fits in structurally, and what you would build first. The core problem you're solving. Every existing platform for sharing creative work is built on the broadcast model. One person makes, many people consume. Platform measures the consumption. Measurement system is the poison. The moment you introduce metrics, you introduce optimization. And the moment you introduce optimization, you corrupt the creative impulse. You have to turn art back into content. So the fundamental design challenge is, how do you build a platform that facilitates the gift loop? Make, offer, receive, respond without any of the machinery that corrupted. is the craft accelerator. It helps people bridge the gap between their vision and their skill. Someone who's never written music but hears something in their head can use AI to get closer to the sound. Someone who wants to make a short film but doesn't know cinematography can use AI to learn the principles and context. This is AI as apprenticeship, not making the art for you but helping you make the art that's in you. The key distinction is that the AI never generates the final work, it teaches, suggests, troubleshoots, and assists. The human's hand is always the last one on it. AI is the matchmaker. Gift economy, the magic isn't just in the giving. It's in the fit between gift and receiver. A poem about grief finding its way to someone who's grieving. A piece of music about resilience reaching someone who needs it today. AI can understand what someone made and what someone needs and connect them without either person having to perform for an algorithm. Not this content will make the most engagement, but this particular thing might mean something to this particular person right now. Third, AI is the invisible infrastructure. It handles everything that is in the art or the connection, translation between languages, so a woodworker in Osaka can give to someone in Lagos. Logistics, if physical objects are involved, the boring stuff that would otherwise require building a corporation. AI makes it possible for the gift economy to function at scale without institutions. This is so interesting. Like, again, when you think about Amazon, yes, Amazon is an infrastructure. Amazon is a really important infrastructure, but a lot of it could also be said as bullshit jobs because people are creating, first of all, people are creating things that nobody wants and then trying to sell it, and then people are ordering things that they don't really want. Now, this corner will get the most engagement, but this particular thing might mean something to this particular person right now. Here's the invisible infrastructure, the core mechanics, what makes us different from everything that exists. No follower counts, no likes, no public metrics of any kind. When someone shares a piece of work, they don't see a number, they see who received it and if that person chooses how they responded. The response isn't a like button, it's a prompt. What did this make you feel? Or what did this remind you of? Or simply space to write something back. The unit of value is an engagement, it's reciprocal attention. The gift chain, when you receive something that moves you, the platform invites you gently, never obligatorily to make something in response. You received a photograph that made you feel something, so you wrote a paragraph. Someone receives your paragraph and inspires a sketch. The platform traces these chains of creative response, and that becomes the invisible structure instead of follower graphs. Small circles, not broadcasts. You don't share with the public, you share with a circle. Some you chose, some AI suggested based on genuine resonance, not engagement prediction. The intimacy is the feature. You were not shouting into a void, hoping for validation. You are handing something to a small group of people and seeing what it does to them. The porch. Really cool. Okay. The question that will determine everything. The hardest design problem will face is the technical, it's philosophical. Every platform eventually faces pressure to grow, to monetize, to measure. Ask for engagement metrics. Every advisor will suggest adding likes just as feedback. Every growth consultant will recommend algorithmic feeds just to help discovery. Every single one of those suggestions will be the first drop of poison. So the question you need to answer before you write a line of code is, how does this sustain itself without becoming the thing it's trying to replace? The gift economy can be funded by attention economy. If you get that wrong, you'll build another Instagram with better branding.